Werner, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Sean.
So today we're here, and this is a specific session that we're doing for CEOs and executive leadership and people in senior positions. The outcome that we're going to deliver is understanding your psychological hardwiring and how that impacts your performance as a CEO. And then also, then how you can start to unlock a wider range of your leadership potential as well, to become more of a full spectrum leader. So I'm really looking forward today. We're going to get a lot of value out of it. So thank you.
You're one of our best marketers.
So you've got an unusual background, Werner. So it's not every day that I get to talk to someone who is an Air Force combat fighter, is a military colonel that has their master's degree in psychotherapy, and then now was coaching CEOs, surgeons, pilots, all on how to optimally get the most out of themselves. It's really fascinating. So take us back to the beginning of that journey. So how did you begin in the aviation and military industry?
Well, in Switzerland, you might be familiar with Switzerland, we don't have an army, we are an army, so each male has to jump. Yep. In my time, that was talking about the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. That was my time, and I had the privilege to join the Air Force as a cadet, as a pilot training cadet. Once I got my wings in the Air Force, after 2.5 years, I decided to also make it my professional career, but as a civil airline pilot. So in Switzerland, we have this option. For the next 32 years, I spent about 10 to 12 weeks annually in the Air Force in blocks of 1 or 2 weeks. The rest I spent doing holidays and flying as an airline captain around the globe for Swiss Air, which was at the time the Swiss flag carrier, with about 75,000 employees at the time, a large airline. And I also had a training career inside the airline. With my postgrad in human factors, I became actually the general manager, human factors training for the whole airline, for any leadership training, pilot captain's course, and all that stuff went through my department.
Yeah, so I want to drill in a little bit more there. So when it comes to human factors, because you were looking at air safety, and one of the things that you'd learned was when I think the statistic you sort of shared with me is almost 80% of crashes or incidents within the civil and military aviation industries are often coming back to human factors.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's the Air Force, like medicine, unfortunately, are reactive. Only once we had all these accidents and we did a serious research about why these accidents happen, the root causes, we found out it's actually neither technology nor the process or location. It was actually human beings. If it's human beings, it's usually not their skills or their knowledge. It's usually their intra or interpersonal behavior. So people in a very crucial moment in crucial decision-making are not on the same page. Yeah. And unfortunately, as a result, in civil aviation, we had a huge number of crashes that were really due to the human factor issues.
Yeah. Okay. So in this high stakes environment, in civil and military aviation, when you know that it's humans and their breakdown in communication and their styles that lead to these major incidents. And so that's then what's taken you down this path to better understanding human factors. And so then you did your postgraduate in this as well?
Yeah, during my airline period, that was years back, that was 76 to 81, 5 years, I had a huge opportunity to do a postgrad psychotherapy. So I was kind of a fighter pilot, I was an airline pilot, and I was a psychotherapist. That was a little bit of a strange combination. But it helped me big time to take this topic of human factors onto a real serious level, to the point where I actually was one of 7 who on the European level were responsible to hammer out all the rules and regulations, how human factor training in commercial aviation in Europe had to be hammered out by all airlines. So it was a significant contribution to going onto a real serious level and not just talk about things that, staying on the surface, we really were digging in and trying to point out what it really is when we talk human factors in high-risk environment. The same is true for nuclear power stations. The same is true in medicine. In medicine, if things go wrong, there's a huge risk that people die. In aviation, if things go wrong, people die. In nuclear research, people die. Yeah. It's a high-risk environment. in a different way than other commercial areas where probably the bottom line doesn't pan out the way they thought it might pan out, but nothing else happens. It's a financial risk. Whilst here we have human life. So this is why medicine developed quite some interest in what we were doing in aviation. That's how the bridge was built between aviation, the way how aviation approached the human factors, and medicine followed.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And so I guess for any CEOs and executive leaders sort of listening to this, we're learning today from someone who's not an expert in motivational theory. Like, this is someone who actually needs to understand, you know, human behaviors on a life and death basis, right? And it was sort of then during this discovery that you became an expert in PCM, or the process communication model. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, the point is that I discovered PCM, unfortunately, much too late. I was already deep into management and in military career and all that stuff. But once we had discovered this, it just opened a total new book for us in terms of having an opportunity to approach teams, to approach individuals in a very different way. With this methodology, which, as I might mention, is based on clinical research, so it's valid, it's reliable. It has been scrutinized many, many times over the years, and organizations such as NASA have taken PCM on board as early as 1978 for astronaut recruitment, astronaut team training, etc. It really opened a path that allows people in a totally non-judgmental way to have self-awareness, to have awareness of how other people tick and why they tick differently, and how can I behave in a way that other people tick differently, that I can motivate them and I can instantly get their motivation to cooperate with me instead of getting their back up. So it's a very powerful tool, and it has a pretty impressive track record, not only in terms of well-being, whatever, actually in terms of millions of dollars.
Yeah, absolutely. So through this journey of discovering, how human breakdown or human failures can result in disasters. It's taking you on this journey then to formal qualifications and the postgrad in psychotherapy, but then further into this process communication model. And then this is the framework you mentioned NASA are using. I know surgeons are using, CEOs are using. I even know that like Pixar and some of the studios are then using this as like a framework for connecting with people through their creative endeavors as well.
Yeah. For example, the movie Brave, which is a Pixar movie, an amazing movie. The movie director, she is a PCM facilitator, and she did all the characters within that movie Brave according to PCM concept. So it's an amazing movie, and it really it pulls a chord. When you watch that movie, you see other people, and it's real life stuff that happens in that cartoon. So it's amazing.
Yeah, fascinating. I'm gonna watch. I'll put it on my watch list with my kids.
Yeah.
And so this is fascinating, right? So you're understanding people and how we engage, and it's scientifically validated, which is why NASA and surgeons and CEOs are using this as a framework. How does that background of your understanding of people, and then there's PCM, how does that directly relate to a CEO? Like, why do they care about it?
Well, the thing is, if you're an airline pilot, if you're a fighter pilot, if you're a surgeon, and if you're a CEO, you cannot muck around. It's too costly, okay? So you are reliable, or you want to rely on methods that work, which not just have look nice, they really work. And this is one of the success rates that PCM has. It's really working. It gives you tangible results very quickly. The point is that PCM allows to have an approach to myself in a different way. I learned that I basically have much more on board than what I usually use.
Yeah.
And once I learned that, I can also project this on other people, and I can start to deal with people who tick in a different way. I'll give you an example how this is pretty interesting for us to observe. If I read the Harvard Business Review, quite often there is a report of a very successful CEO that describes his career.
Yeah.
And in the next Harvard Business Review, there's another report from another CEO that describes how effective his career was and what happened. And every time we read those stories, we read in a way that this person is convinced that this is the way to become successful.
Yeah.
From our point of view, we know that there are several different base types, and a person that is fundamentally based on facts and figures, information, data, logic, time structure, can be very successful. But the person that is based on values, beliefs, commitment, mission-minded, mission statements can be also very successful. Or the other person that is looking for action, significant action, and to have significant action to turn a company around, I need a lot of people. How do I win over these people with a tremendous amount of charm and charisma that I have on board, that the guy that is dealing with the world with logic, being responsible, organized, and on-time operation, that person probably has hardly any charisma, while the other person has charisma. Both of them can be successful, but in very different ways. Now, if we learn to systematize the way or why these people are successful, it helps us much better to adapt to them and these to adapt to others.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the tool set that we can offer through PCM training, which again is based on clinical research.
Yeah. Okay. So when you're reading those HBR reviews from CEOs, and whenever they've got their opinion or their story about what led to their success, it's through the lens of the particular model in which they're viewing the world. So you start to be able to see that. And you said that you've done some research even with CEOs on, PCM and just better understanding their people. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, in the CEO has a team of direct reports. That's kind of the executive level. The CEO also has to deal with the board. That's also a group of people. And we all know that in a team, you need one foul apple that can collapse your whole team. The whole team becomes dysfunctional if you have one foul apple. Yeah. Unfortunately, there are countries where you can't just fire people, and then you're confronted with a pretty sad situation that you can hardly do anything. However, PCM helps you to help people not to go into that dysfunctional behavior. Or if they're in dysfunctional behavior, it helps you to invite them to the U-turn and come back into a functional, productive mode of cooperation with other people. Yeah. We know that over 90% of all dysfunctional behavior of people, whether that's on the CEO or executive level, or whether that's on the shop floor, doesn't matter. Over 90% of all dysfunctional behaviors come from the fact that our psychological needs are not met positively. Right. And this is one, I now go straight into some factual data or information about this whole PCM system, which would take hours to explain, which we do in our 3-day courses or online as well. But one of the most important elements is to be aware that we all have what we call psychological needs. These psychological needs are with awareness or without awareness, having a tremendous influence on my daily life, because day and night, I'm always looking to get these needs met positively. Yeah. And these psychological needs can be very different, but they're very specific, and we know them. Yeah. So, for example, if my need is to get recognition for the quality of work, for the productivity of my work, and recognition for my time structure, and I need time structure, then I have what we call with me an existential question. So if I look into the camera looking at you, Sean, or if I look at 500 people, then my existential question in my field of vision is, am I competent? Yeah. And I'm constantly asking the world, am I competent? Now, if the world tells me that I'm doing great work and productive work, then I get my primary psychological needs met positively. Just to give you an example, if I do not get a positive answer to this existential question, am I competent? If this is what is my primary motivator, we unfortunately, whatever the motivator is, we unfortunately then go into modus operandi. If I do not get my needs met positively, I will certainly get them met negatively, which is much better than not getting any attention at all. Well, this type then typically does not getting any confirmation that what he is doing is productive and fantastic quality work. This person, she or he, tries to forcibly get that recognition by piling up more and more and more work, more and more work. The more work I pile up, the less of the chance that anybody can tell me that I'm doing productive work. because I can't be productive anymore. And now, because I'm now in the red zone, I now pile up so much work that eventually the whole shebang crashes down on me and I have to burn out.
Right.
This is one of the predictable sequential sequences that we know that happens with people if their psychological needs are not met positively. And I'll give you another example. There's another person who needs to be told that she is a nice person. Okay, it's so nice to have you here. It was fantastic to have you in my team. You're beyond what you deliver in your job. Let me say the most important thing for me is to have you on board. Thank you very much for you're a fantastic person. This person that needs these recognition of a person and sensory, this person's existential question is, am I lovable?
Yeah.
If I do not get any positive answer to am I lovable, and for example, this is quite the risk in a high-tech environment or in a high-pressure environment, because there is no time for being nice, okay? Yeah. This person will go into distress. Now, in distress, this person will change from am I lovable, I will become unlovable, and then I will make in an organization, for example, whatever the level is, whether I'm a professor at the university, I'm head of department at the university, whether I'm CEO, doesn't matter where I am, I will then go into distress and I will do things where I will achieve to become unlovable. That means in a professional environment, for example, I start to make stupid, silly, dangerous mistakes.
Yeah.
Surgeon that has 3 near misses with babies, if only one would have been a hit, the surgeon would have been struck off the list. Yeah. Typical distress sequence of a person that is primarily, the primary need is getting recognition. So we have to be aware of these things, and just pulled up one of these components which are absolutely decisive in our life, whether we are functioning or whether we are dysfunctional. Now, if I have found out what helps my needs to be okay, and I'm happy with that, I then unfortunately get to the point where I think this is probably how people are happy, or I can help other people, so I can invite them to be happy. So I do the same thing to you, Sean, and to her, and to him, and to him, which for half of them might be completely the wrong thing. If I feed the wrong needs to a person, then the person has a battery discharge. And instead of getting the battery charge of being powerful, initiative, productive and cooperative, the person deflates and the batteries go flat and the person goes into stress and distress.
Right.
So we need in short, in PCM, we learn that each of one of us has a specific way how we want to be addressed. So as a CEO, it is absolutely relevant with my executive team that I know how to address each one of these guys around me in my team. I need to know how to manage. That's also different from type to type, how to manage these people differently. And then I need to know how to feed their needs. Mm-hmm. If I can do this to properly connect, properly motivate, and properly manage people, then I have a whole happy bunch around me, and my life as a CEO is easy. And I just quote a CEO that recently from Switzerland, where before COVID, I was actually back in Europe in January and February. A CEO wrote me an email saying, I've never ever before in my career as a CEO for several organizations been so happy and so relaxed, because our team just is completely in sync all the time, okay? Because we know how to deal with each other.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's fascinating. So as a CEO, then first I need to understand my psychological hardwiring. And I've got these different, and I think that the 6 existential questions is a nice way of simplifying the complex science behind it, for sure. But I've got these 6 different clusters, and all of us have these 6 different clusters of personality traits. All of those come with different needs and different strengths. And then, and we all have all 6, don't we? It's just that we're a particular blend in terms of which ones are primary and which ones we're the weakest in, and where our particular strengths and balances are as well. And then, so if I'm a CEO, like this becomes particularly important, first of all, in knowing what my strengths are, managing my own stress and my own performance. Use the example of the surgeon. It's the same as a CEO, right? You can't afford to start making those easy mistakes. With each of my dominant styles, I'm going to have a strength, but then a blind spot also, right? And then once I've mastered myself, then I then need this skill set for others, right? Because I need to, and yeah, I think that's a critical distinction you've made to me before, is that PCM it's not a personality profile, like it's a skill set. So like, you know, knowing your profile is the beginning, but that's just like the very beginning, because then you need to understand what that means for you, but also what that means for people around you. And so I can see why that would have a big impact both on the CEO, but then also at a executive leadership and a organizational culture level as well. You talked then about like some of the particular strengths of CEOs. So you were talking about how someone, you know, if I'm values and mission driven versus perhaps if I'm incredibly detail oriented. On the flip side of that, are there particular, as a CEO, blind spots that I might have in terms of, you know, because if my strength comes with a blind spot, like what does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, for example, the person that is value-based, that is mission-minded, observant, conscientious, rule-based, not interested in detail, but interested in strategic thinking, being able to offer an organization huge values, mission statements, and the strategic view to the horizon line. This is where I want to take this organization. That's my mission, to take the organization there. This person is so very much focused on this mode of operation that she might have a huge problem with others that are not mission-minded. They're primarily focused on other people and on other relationships.
Yeah.
So
from like the Steve Jobs biography, that seems very much like him, as this person who had this like firm defined vision of the future, and he really valued creativity and those sorts of things. But then also, if you hear accounts of how he dealt with other people inside of the business, it might have been less than positive, right? He stepped on some toes on his way through.
Yeah, you see, I give you an example. A surgeon in training that was sent to our course because this person became unbearable in operating theater for very specific reason, which was PCM is crystal clear, said, why should I be nice? What's the purpose of being nice? Okay. And that just says everything, okay? Yeah. So the person who is very nice, who is compassionate, sensitive, warm, that person might have a blind spot on being a person that is value-based, that is mission-minded, that is very self-confident, that might be the blind spot. And that's always a high risk in communication, in management, and in feeding needs, that we run through our blind spots into trouble with other people. So with PCM, we clearly show where your strengths are and where the traps are, where you have to put on the gym shoes and start to practice and become better and better. It's like a weak muscle. You know, if I'm 3 months in a hospital bed and the first time I get out, I need 2 nurses that support me, otherwise I collapse because all the muscles have gone. Yeah. So they take me to physio to rebuild my muscles. The same thing with our psychological strengths, the different stuff that we have aboard that we hardly ever need or hardly ever use. The moment we start to use it, we become better and better, and our spectrum to deal with other people goes from here to here, okay? It opens wide, okay? And it's quite impressive to talk with CEOs that have gone through this kind of training. And if I may, we just recently asked a number of CEOs that we're familiar with that went through training here in Australia, New Zealand, and in Europe, what their present pain points are in regard to, you know, under this tremendous COVID wave that swept over the whole world. And then how did PCM help you with your experience to do that? If I may just quote one CEO, this is an organization with more than 8,000 people. The CEO said, the pain points are creating greater organization resilience, including amongst our leadership during a time of such significant uncertainty, so that our leaders are able to effectively guide and support their teams. Strategizing with sufficient pace and engagement to deliver the transformation that is needed to meet growing demands for this industry and the serious economic sequel of COVID. And then ensuring that our values serve as morale compass for decision-making, and that civility and kindness are not lost as critical decisions are made. And then the question, how did PCM help you to deal with this? CEO says, provided a greater understanding of how to meet the psychological needs of my executive team during such an unprecedented year, and particularly their distress patterns, then understanding myself, particularly with regard to distress behavior and things that predispose to it, understanding of others' distress pattern and why they may be having them. So that is a tremendous support structure that a CEO has on a high level, where it's absolutely crucial under the given pressures under this COVID thing. Does my camera just
we're blurry briefly? You might need to be further or back. It's fine.
Just go further back and come back in again. Okay.
Yep, there you are.
So it's a tremendous, powerful tool set. And of course, to take this tool set on board is beyond just attending some information event. You know, we just piling up more and more information. The intellectual upload is not what develops our skills. I always compare this in medicine. You know, the medical doctors, they go to university for some 7 years. Then they go 2 years as junior doctors, in hospitals and sniff around. And then they decide whether they want to become a psychiatrist, a pediatric surgeon or a vascular surgeon. And then they go 5 years into practical training under supervision of an organization such as the Royal Australian College of Surgeons here in Australia and New Zealand. And they go from hospital to hospital half a year, and they do nothing else than operationalize the knowledge they have piled up during their 7 years at the university and learn how to apply it. So it's skill development.
Yeah.
And without skill development, the whole thing is just a huge block of information, but people cannot do anything with just that information. Yeah. We need to operationalize the information, and this is the same thing with our training here.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And yeah, it's worth noting that the Royal Australasian, the College of Surgeons, right, is like, this is the skills, this is the framework that they're working with. So I think the neurosurgeons, what's the society there as well? They're like working on using this methodology also as part of training.
Well, yeah, the neurosurgeons are one of the 9 specialties within the Royal Australian College of Surgeons.
Understood.
And they have already introduced, I think for the pediatric surgeon, this training is part of their basic training.
Yeah.
And the College of Surgeons is running these courses under its own umbrella. And we had the privilege to train surgeons and anesthetists to be their trainers. So they're using our material to do their training on behalf of the Royal Australian College of Surgeons. They're running dozens of courses every year. They have waiting lists. So it's a tremendous success.
Yeah, fantastic.
We have the statement of the director of surgical services, huge organization, 5 hospitals together. He said, PCM really revolutionized the way that our teams in operating theaters are interacting with each other.
Yeah,
so
fantastic.
Amazing.
Yeah. Great. So I'm a CEO. I developed this skill, like I understand my lens through which I see the world, which helps me identify my character strengths, but then also my weaknesses. I then learn to better manage my own stress and distress, and like making sure that my needs are met as well. And then the evolution of that is I begin to improve I become a full spectrum leader, right? Like, how do I build out my capabilities and other as well? I think you use the phrase with leadership agility or leadership adaptability. Like, tell me about that. What does that mean? Okay,
leadership agility means that I can basically energize all these different types that I have on board. So I'm not only the person who is value-based, mission-minded, conscientious, rule-based, and having strong opinions on things. I can at the same time, I can energize what I have on board, which is my part, which is compassionate, sensitive, warm. Yeah. Or I can be playful, spontaneous, and creative, okay? Or I can be reflective, okay? Yeah. So each, clinical research showed that there are 6 types, and without going further into details, you and I, we have all these 6 types on board. One of these types is the one we were born with. That's the strongest in our life. That's usually what we invest professionally. So typically CEOs are usually either those that are focusing on facts and figures, information, data, fact, and time structure and organizational charts and all that, or they are value-based, mission-minded, they're conscientious, observant, rule-based, okay? Or they are action-oriented, okay? They love the risk, they love the challenge, they push more than anybody else in organizations through the wall, and very often they are successful, hence they're more successful as CEOs than others because they are more risk-loving than others. So there are typically 3 types.
Yeah.
The same way like we find in the whole fraternity of surgeons, we find very specific types. We find amongst the neurosurgeons, we find mainly those which are focusing on information, data, facts, and figures. Radiologists, the same. Whilst pediatric surgeons are usually those which their strongest part is being compassionate, sensitive one. They're caring for kids.
Yeah.
So this is how these types relate to others. And then we have all these 6 types on board. We just learn how to energize all of them. So if I'm the CEO in a executive team, and I have, say, 6 direct reports, and I have this agility, this flexibility, and I can deal with any of these 6 in different ways, how I connect with them, how I manage them, and how I feed their needs. These 3 things are different. If I can hit the nail on its head for each of these 6 people, I have 6 happy people around me.
Yeah, yeah.
And each person realizes that I'm dealing with Frank in a different way than with Martha.
Yeah.
And with Johnny, I'm dealing differently than with Andrea. So I have these skills. So nobody is concerned about that. They just realize, well, we're lucky. This guy actually can help us to be motivated, to be happy. And there are no questions asked.
Yeah.
Whilst if I just run my own show, this might be okay for half of them. And unfortunately, 100 years ago, it was good enough that I took over and I said, guys, this is the way I run the show, love it or drop it, okay? Yeah. But these days, even the CEO, or the CEO especially, has not only responsibility, but these guys actually have accountability for what they achieve.
Yeah.
And I have accountability whether my behavior, the way I manage my team, results in half of my team being frustrated because I don't know how to do it. I should step down. I'm not qualified. Okay? Yeah. These are not computers that respond to me. These are people. And we all know that things, and I have had enough insight, things go wrong, whether it's on an executive team, whether it's in an Air Force squadron, whether it's in an airline, things go usually wrong because it's people problems. Okay? Yeah. Yeah. And if we don't know how to handle people, how to handle myself, then we are really at risk. Especially we are actually not even qualified to manage people if we don't know how to do it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Again, it's almost like the ability to meet people on their frequency. So there's like a particular a frequency or a language in which I need to be engaged with and need to be communicated with to maximize my own performance and also to keep me charged and stop me from making silly mistakes. And so then that flows. Yeah, the CEO first masters it for themselves, then can look at their leadership team. You could almost even look at the makeup of your leadership team in terms of, do you have the right dominant styles and skill sets? So you've got well-rounded decisions coming out of that group of people as well, right? Because if everyone's, I imagine if they, do CEOs have a tendency to hire people like them? Like, do they surround themselves with people with similar profiles? Or
I couldn't confirm that.
Yeah.
No, I mean, this would be really a weak point, because if we just take the same wood on board we're made of, it's a killer in terms of any development in this organization.
Yeah.
Or we can allow diversity and a broad spectrum to be around us and work together, the richer the organization, the higher the potential for development and progress. Okay. Yeah. The monoculture in the woods, in the forest, that's not really very helpful in an organization. Even if I look, and I've been working with police force. Okay, I've been working with judges. Yeah. Even on that level, it's quite interesting to see. Sometimes they have people who do not really fit into kind of the scheme that the idea you would have. How does a judge need to be needs to look like psychological? No, but they actually add to a tremendous richness. And I can tell you this has tremendous implications. For example, our whole school system, up to and including university, postgrad, whatever. You can take it for granted that probably all over the world, these systems have been developed by those that perceive the world through thinking about the world, the facts, information, data, facts, and figures, logical thinking, and those that go for values, beliefs, mission-minded, structure, principles, rules, okay? These guys have developed school system. Hence, a person who is strongest at being creative, spontaneous, and playful, that person typically, and we have the tremendous privilege to have this person as a trainer, is a doctor in this part of the world.
Yeah.
This person failed 3 times the final exam to become an anesthetist, because that person prepared himself, herself, exactly according to the rules given by the college that is responsible for that specialty training.
Yeah.
Now, this person then eventually, she bought a life-size big teddy bear, put the teddy bear into a chair, and like a professor was teaching to this teddy bear the whole thing about anesthesia. And by doing that, got everything on board and passed the exam with flying colors.
Yeah.
It's just a very interesting thing, pretty simple, that people have different ways to think. There are people whose line between entering the university and exiting the university is a straight line, okay? These are usually the thinkers, okay? They're logical, responsible, organized, but there are people whose line, how they went through university looks like this, okay? And then eventually they came to the finish point, but it wasn't a straight line. So this has a lot to do with the psychological hardwiring. The more people, even at the student level, the more they are aware of how they tick, the easier life becomes, because they can now focus on doing the right things according to their psychological hardwiring and not running after something which is not there.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense to me. And I can see there's a conundrum there as well, because imagining your executive team, if I've got a more robust, well-rounded decision-making function is going to be created by having a mix of people with different skill sets and like primary understandings and lenses, but then that group's also more likely to have conflicts because they're all approaching things from different lenses. So it's the exact thing that makes good decisions can potentially introduce more likelihood for conflicts or misunderstandings. And then that's why this, like, having a common language and a common skill set and a common understanding of how you each relate to the world and understanding each other, you need that to then create that optimal decision-making function within your executive team.
Can I just give you a short episode that was so funny? A person who is not the typical CEO material, okay? The base type, okay? That person was the head of marketing. And because I was working with that organization for several years, I was then tasked to go with this chief of marketing to a huge exhibition, which was in preparation of a conference. And they have, outside the conference, they have these booths, where all the conference goers, they hang around over lunchtime, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of money involved. So I went with this guy, and he completely ignored their own company's booth. He took along material to build a mini golf course in the gangways. And me, with my structure, I thought this guy is out of touch. This guy lost it. He's besides his shoes.
Yeah.
Guess where all the conference goers were during lunch break? Everybody was playing mini golf, okay?
Wow. Yeah.
He was in the center. His name was everywhere. He was in the center of everything. So this is something that has to do with playfulness and creativity and spontaneity. Okay. That me, as I'm of course engineering background, Air Force pilot, airline pilot, I'm one of these logical guys. I would never have had that idea to do that. It's amazing. So if you have a variety of these species of human being on board, you get a much richer platform of potential than if you have everybody kind of standing in attention the same way.
Yeah, understood. Well, this has been fascinating. Thanks so much for that. So if I'm a CEO and I want to do this, right? So I want to better understand myself first. So the lens that I see through the world, my strengths, my blind spots, how to recharge myself, and then start to build that skill set with my executive team and how I interact with others. And then indeed at an organizational level as well, like there's a few different options and ways that they can start to like understand PCM. So
actually tomorrow I have another group of 10 from Perth all the way across to Sydney and to Queensland, and then from people from New Zealand.
Yeah.
And we start at 10 a.m. And of course, then that's 5 a.m. in Perth.
Yeah.
And you do not expect that these people get out of bed, so we record the whole session.
Yeah.
So tomorrow I'm running a 2-hour session, which is an introduction into PCM. Each participant has his or her own profile being sent before the course. They already have it in their hands right now. And they have been guided to a set of 3 short video clips that gives them kind of the big picture idea what this is all about. And with that background, they're now coming to those 2 hours tomorrow, and where we introduce here the way I do it here. And I also work here on the flip chart. I'm using the flip chart in the background. And then I'm also using some stuff on the laptop. So we switch forth and back. It's pretty lively. For 2 hours, very intense. We're on a tight ship. There's a lot of information coming across. And after these 2 hours, we say goodbye, and we meet again on Friday for the next 2 hours. And after these 2 hours, people usually have a comprehensive understanding of all the elements. Yep. And they have a comprehensive understanding how it works. But again, this is information transfer. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me use this example. I recently at a big medical conference, I said, are you, ladies and gentlemen, this one in Australia, are you, ladies and gentlemen, all doctors, surgeons, are you aware that in Australia, I think 42% of marriages get divorced? Why is it that not 42% of you, ladies and gentlemen, end up in court for medical malpractice? It's of course because you go 7 years to university, you pile up a lot of knowledge. Yeah. And after 2 years as junior doctor, finding out that you want to become a psychiatrist or vascular surgeon, you eventually decide what you want to do in terms of your specialty. And then you enter a high-powered program of 5 years in specialty, minimum 5 to 7 years. And after that, you become a fellow of the college. Then you're a checked out surgeon. In those 5 years, you actually operationalize the knowledge that you piled up at university. Mm-hmm. So there are 7 years information transfer, and then 5 to 7 years putting this information into action. Okay, the supervision under the watch of very experienced people. It's a very tough program, a long program. Mm. So then I ask, that's why hardly anyone ends up in court for medical malpractice. But why do 40 or 42% of all marriages end up in court for malpractice? Because they've never been trained. Yeah. They didn't go to university. They probably read a book, if it's okay, or didn't even read the book, and they had no training. So, So in terms of practicality, the information transfer is one thing. Yeah. But without the hands-on training, it's not going to be effective. So the hands-on training is something that we even now, these days, we can do online. We progressed this during COVID. We were challenged, so we developed methods how we can do even. I'm even running in the next 2 months. I'm running an online PCM certification course online. Okay, we even can do that. So we develop methods how we can really develop skills. And I'm working very intensely one-on-one with people or in breakout rooms. So that's the transfer of kind of the information into skills.
Yeah, understood. So there were sort of two things there. So I can do the keys to me, and that's the 2-hour sessions, 2 by 2, and that's going to help me. I'm doing a profile beforehand. I get a better sense of myself and where I sit within these framework. And you've made that critical distinction that this isn't a personality profile, it's a skill set. So that keys to me is like a nice introduction to the methodology. It's understanding yourself, it's understanding the different pillars and frameworks that live within PCM that all of these different organizations are using. And then I can go and do the workshop, and that's usually over 2 or 3 days. And then rather than just having information, that's all about building the skill, right? Because it's building that skill of how do I recognize my own strengths and blind spots? How do I better communicate with others? And then when I'm communicating with someone else, how do I better identify their preferred modality? How do I actually then help recharge them? How do I, like, if I start, see those signs of stress and distress, how do I short circuit that, right? Charge that person up, bring them up before they enter that loop, before they start making silly mistakes. So so then that's that more sort of like 2-3 day workshop. Yeah
Well, it's a 3-day workshop to start with, and a 3-day workshop to deal more with distress.
Sure.
If we are limited to online, and right now with all our customers in Australia, we're limited to online, we can do the Key to Me seminar.
Yeah.
Then we have developed one-day modules.
Okay.
And one that we have on our roster in February, for example, is Communication Essentials. That's one of the 3 days of the seminar one, where we focus on communication. So there is each of these one-day modules has a clear set of objectives at the end of the day, and we limit the information purely to what is needed, what's required to then activate this and put this into action. So at the end of the day, you come up with a new skill set.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I'll make sure that through the wizardry of video editing on screen now, rather than my face, people will be able to see those links there for where they can sign up for the different options. And wherever you're seeing this, we'll make sure that there's a few links below as well. So you can go check out those different options. Werner, thank you so much for your time. Like, we've covered a lot of ground. So I'm going to do my best to recap. So, you know, during this journey of yours, like working through the military and aviation and combat fighting, and basically, you know, that insight that 80% of these like errors are due to human factors, and that sort of then flowed into that next section of your career where you're looking at aviation safety. You've done your 5-year postgraduate in psychotherapy. You've discovered this PCM after doing that degree, discovered PCM, and it's to then really unlock this way that people communicate. This is the framework that NASA's using. This is the framework that surgeons are using. This is that the military's using. I'm aware of like a Hollywood producer that's actually using this to like better connect with their audience as well. Like in fact, multiple famous ones are using this framework. So all of these people are using this. And then if I'm a CEO right now, like, beginning to take some steps in this area, first of all, is better understanding of self and better self-management. Then it's better team engagement and actually better, you know, becoming a full spectrum leader, meeting with people where they're at. And then, you know, it's better relationships. And then I can start to look at that at an organizational level as well. So it's, I'm really grateful. Like, thank you for spending time today. Thanks for giving us a little bit of an education into this, because if people weren't aware of PCM, now they've got a better sense of what's possible and what's available to them.
Thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to seeing the participants that are watching this webinar, seeing you online, at least online, or even in face-to-face training. I can only tell you, we have customers like NASA, Coca-Cola, IBM, Microsoft, Audi, BMW, Hewlett-Packard. President Clinton was doing a piece of training with all staff during his 8 years in the White House. It was amazing. It's an amazing journey. And my enthusiasm still at my age after this career is simply by an experience which is so unique. You know, when I run seminars with people, we're not talking about the computer board or a new norm of how to do business. We're talking about we're talking about people's psychological hardwiring. A lot of people have no clue about that, and it's very inspiring and very motivating to see people through and see them how they discover their own options, and that there are at their own potential. There is actually much more to them than what they actually are using. That's a tremendous journey, and I'm just enjoying being the guide on these journeys.